Hey everybody, we're going to get started on this next part of the lecture, which is about how do we form our attitudes about things and impression formation. You know, there's a saying, first impressions are everything. Well, we're going to learn how that's actually pretty true sometimes. And so, you know what? Hopefully this is a fun lecture for you guys, and that you will be able to just kind of put this into context of your own life. So let's give you a term that you're going to need to know, and that is social cognition. Social cognition is the way in which people think about other people. We form attitudes about people, right? Maybe there's some attitudes about people that are very you're fond of somebody. If I said their name, you'd be like, oh, I love that person. They are so incredible. Or maybe it's a negative attitude. An attitude is a tendency to respond positively or negatively towards a certain person, object, idea, or situation. So again, if I had a picture of Donald Trump here, okay, and I put up Donald Trump's picture for you, you would probably he provokes a strong attitude one way or the other. Either people really, really like him or people really don't like him. The same thing with Barack Obama. People either really liked him or they really didn't like him. And so, but we have an attitude about it, right? What are other things? Ooh, maybe it's a restaurant. Maybe, here's one that I think provokes attitude sometimes. A very strong attitude, and that is sushi. Either you like it or you don't. And so you formed that attitude. Maybe it was from an experience. Maybe it's just because it sounds nasty and you've never even tried it, but you don't want a part of it. And so we're going to talk about how do you form your attitudes. So let's start with the ABCs of attitude, okay? We have the affective component, the behavioral component, and the cognitive component. The affective component, of course, is how you feel about something. The behavioral is what do you do about it? Do you act differently? The cognitive component is what you actually think about the person. Now, here's the clue. All of these are not always the same. You might be asking, how is that possible? Well, let me tell you. Think about the last time you had to go, I don't know, maybe it was a Christmas or a family birthday party or some kind of family event, and you know, that one aunt was there, or maybe it was that one uncle. And you just don't really like them that much. They're always up in your face and up in your business and wanting to know all about life, but you feel like, you know, you just don't really care for them. But do you let them see it? No, because you know if you did, your mom or dad, they would be upset. So you have to play nice, right? And so you're nice. You're like, oh, hi, Auntie. Hi, Uncle. How's it going? Yes, life. I'm doing school. It's all good. And you behave. You're totally nice to them. But again, you're feeling, maybe they're not your favorite person, and what you think about them it's probably not going to be favorable either. Maybe you think, you know, Aunt Gertrude's a big gossip and you just don't want to hang out with her. Or Uncle so-and-so might be kind of creepy and you just, yeah. So anyway, so that's just showing you that they're not always the same. So how do we form that attitude? And so I'm going to give you an example here. I use the ocean, and I may have told you this story already, so I won't try to repeat myself too much. But if you remember, I took my boys once to the ocean, and it was a really bad waves that day. And basically the waves came in, knocked us off our feet. Luckily, my kids were like 3 and 5 at the time. Luckily, I had their hands, or else they would have been swept out to sea. It was super scary. There was basically the next morning, the front page of the Orange County Register said, riptides take over Southern California coastline. And we definitely experienced that. So through direct contact, I formed an attitude about the ocean. Do not turn your back on the ocean. It cannot be trusted. Now, maybe you have been told by somebody, maybe it's by me right now, don't trust the ocean, don't turn your back on it. So somebody has taught you to have an attitude about something. Maybe it's through interactions with others. Maybe it's they had an attitude about the ocean, and so you just kind of picked up on it. Maybe that's, or this can be, of course, an attitude about anything, but maybe your parents have always said really negative things about a neighbor. Now, maybe your experience with that neighbor was never negative. Maybe they didn't tell you directly, don't like that neighbor. But just because you've heard what they've talked about, you've taken on that same attitude about that person or that thing. Vicarious conditions, observational learning, basically. Sometimes it's just through watching, man, this is like totally true in high school, I think. You see, maybe those kids are teasing that other kid across the cafeteria, and you saw what brought on that teasing, and so you just learn, oh, I do not want to do that, and I do not want to hang out with those kids, because what if I'm next? I don't like what happened to that person. I definitely don't want that to happen to me. So you form an attitude through that. Persuasion, which persuasion has to do with your you have a discussion question this week about persuasion. It is a process by which one person tries to change the belief, opinion, position, or course of action of another person through argument, pleading, or explanation. How many times have you tried to persuade, maybe it was a parent, I'm sure you were younger, please, please, please let me go to that party or that event. I promise all my friends are going. I saw recently on the internet this little girl who was really upset. She was, I want to say 4 years old, and she was upset because her mom would not let her go to the pub. But my friend got to go to the pub, and the mom says, well, that was for her father's birthday. But I just want to go to the pub. Why can't I am 4 years old. I should be able to go to the pub. She is trying desperately to convince and persuade her mother to let her go to the pub for whatever reason. But this is, maybe you've done it through what you thought was logical argumentation. Well, Mom, if you let me do this, I will learn from the experience. And you try to convince them. Maybe it literally is begging. You are on your knees. Maybe it's you're trying to convince them to do something different as far as, I don't know, how they spend their money. And so again, trying to take a logical approach might be your way of doing that. Factors that become important in predicting how successful and a persuasive effort will be. Well, first of all, we look at the source, the communicator, who is delivering the message. They should be perceived as an expert. A 4-year-old telling her mom, please let me go to the pub. That's the source is 4 years old. We're not going to take her seriously, right? But what if somebody is trying to convince you, well, let's say you see the ads on TV for social distancing right now, right? Who is doing the ad? Well, I believe it's the guy who's in charge of, really it's our national physician. I know he has a title, I can't remember it right now. We believe because he is in his, he's in his job, that he must have some authority. He must know something, right? When you see a commercial for medication, now sometimes they'll have in small print, this is an actor, but they're wearing a white coat because they're giving an air of authority, that they are a doctor and they know what they're talking about, and so they should be able to persuade you to take this certain kind of medication. The message should be clear and well organized. If a person's trying to persuade you of something and they're, hold on, let me think about, Is that going to be very convincing to persuade you to do something or to buy something? No. The last one, the target audience. Characteristics of the people who are intended for the target for the message. So I always use this example because I think it's super funny. And right now we're all at home most of the day, right? So if you watch TV at all during the day, what are the commercials that are on? Well, there is a lot of commercials for like Life Alert, lawyer commercials for basically injury attorneys. They are targeting people that they believe are home right now during the middle of the day. Because under normal circumstances, who is home? Older individuals or people who are sick and can't go to work for whatever reason or injured. And so they are basically, they're advertising to that population. If we looked at like a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game on television, what kind of advertisements are you seeing then? It's usually not injury attorneys. It's going to be like beer commercials, chip commercials, things that they believe, marketers, somebody is they out there, right? That they believe is speaking to the audience who is watching whatever show that is. So they do take care, they do take into account who is the target audience. Okay, there are a couple of different models or theories that go around. Remember, everybody has a theory in psychology that go around basically how we persuade people. The central route to persuasion versus the peripheral route to persuasion. The central route to persuasion is basically, give me the facts. The type of information processing that involves attention to factual content, data of the message itself. Give me the facts. Tell me what you're trying to sell. Tell me what you're wanting to do. I don't need all the fluff. Sometimes when my kids come to me and they want to do something specific, and but they're giving me all these circumstantial, and they're setting me up. I finally sometimes just cut them off and go, just tell me what you're asking for. And I want the central route. Just tell me, so then I can make a decision instead of trying to, butter me up for it. Peripheral route, though, that is where really it's not all about the message. It's about a lot of the surrounding factors, the length of the message, the appearance of the person trying to give you the message. If you ever go to a timeshare sale, what they do to get you in is they'll give you a really discounted rate for a hotel room or for a timeshare room for like 2 nights, with the guarantee that you will sit in on their sales pitch. However, their sales pitch is not going to be 4 hours because they know nobody would come and do that for 4 hours. It's 90 minutes. They know that the length of time is directly correlates to your willingness to come and sit and listen to them. And so we look at the peripheral route. How many older people have literally given away money because he was such a nice young man and he was trying to raise money for college, so I went ahead and gave him $35,000 for a magazine subscription? It happens all the time, unfortunately. Our older people tend to be really vulnerable to peripheral route of persuasion. So just be aware of that. It's something good to know about. Okay, this is actually one of my favorite concepts, and that is cognitive dissonance. By the way, cognitive dissonance is your incentive word for the week. So what is it? Cognitive dissonance. Yes, that is your incentive word. Don't forget it. Okay, so let's go back to this. Okay, so it is a sense of discomfort or distress that occurs when a person's behavior does not correspond to that person's attitude. Okay, so what does that really mean? When I was in graduate school, I actually went to a faith-based graduate school, and because I just kind of want to see what that perspective looked like, given that I was kind of raised in that. But one of the things that my graduate program kind of talked about was, what does it mean to bring like a person's faith into the counseling office? And what it came down to was actually cognitive dissonance. That was the whole thing. If a person says, because here, a lot of people, no matter what your belief system is, it looks different for you versus anybody else in that belief system. It just does. Whether you're atheist or Christian or Jewish or Islamic or whatever your belief system is, it looks different because it's whatever your belief is, right? So to have somebody come in and try to speak to that is really difficult. But what we can speak to is their value systems. And so that's kind of the approach I always take when I'm in counseling, is looking at what does a person say they value. And so the example they gave us, which I think really rings well with this, is if a person says, I value family. Because a lot of us say that, right? We value family. We can see the importance in it. If you have a couple who comes in for counseling and they both say, and I'm this could either be the man or woman. I'm not picking on one side or the other, but for this use of an example, I'm going to use the man, okay? Let's say the man has been cheating, but he says, I value family. The fact that he is not living by what he says his value system is probably going to cause some discomfort within himself. Because he's doing exactly the opposite of what his value system says. If he says he values family, but he's cheating on his wife, what is he doing? He's doing something that would actually destroy his family. And so being able to kind of bring that out into the open and point it out, but that is cognitive dissonance. I think we do that a lot, not maybe cheat on somebody, but we hold values, but we don't always live by them. And it probably sometimes causes some distress. Do you remember ever lying to your parent, even though you were told not to lie? Did you end up feeling kind of guilty about it? Now, some of you are like, nope, don't feel guilty about that at all. Good for you. But some of you might recognize that, right? Or doing something you knew was wrong, and that angst you feel about it. That is an example of cognitive dissonance. So let's say that you are living in cognitive dissonance. You have some options. Okay, so here are your options. You can, number one, change your behavior, right? So the guy who is cheating on his wife, stop cheating. Now, it's not just going to make everything be better, no, but it's a start. So they can change their behavior to fit their attitude. They can change their thinking to justify their behavior. So instead of holding the value system that, maybe, maybe they'll look at it and go, family can look a lot of different ways. And so maybe our family needs to be more inclusive. And I'm going to have multiple wives. Hey, they can choose to do that, right? Legally, not really, but they can choose to do that. The last one would be adopt new thinking to justify behavior. So not just changing thinking, but actually adding something. So I still value family, but again, and maybe this is more appropriate than to use an example than the changing thinking. But basically saying, I think it's okay, saying, maybe they decide to have an open marriage. So instead of believing that a family should be, a one-on-one kind of situation, that again, maybe adopting a new idea or thinking in order to make what their choice is or what their behavior is to justify it. So, okay, next, an experiment. by Leon Festinger and James Carl Smith. Although I will tell you, I always forget James Carl Smith's name because Festinger is just so memorable. Okay, so what they did with this is they took male student volunteers and gave them a very boring task for an hour. Their task was to sort wooden spoons or spoons of some sort. I don't know why I always say wooden. I don't know if it was wooden spoons. But they were asked to tell female volunteers after the hour was up that the task was really fun. Okay? Now here's what they added to the whole experiment is half the male volunteers they paid $1 and the other half they paid $20. What they thought would happen was the more money you were paid for the task, that the more you would like the task. However, just the opposite happened. The $1 folks convinced themselves that the task was interesting and fun. So were they lying for $1? But again, the idea that they were able to change their belief about it, kind of interesting. Change their attitude. Okay, impression formation. I told you at the beginning of this lecture that there's some truth to the fact of first impressions are everything. Well, this kind of proves it. Forming of the first knowledge a person has about another person. And we say people, but it could be about anything. It could be about ideas also. It doesn't have to just be about a person. The primacy effect is the first time, though, people meet someone, they form an impression of that person that persists, even if contradictory information arises. Have you ever met that person and maybe they were having just a really lousy day, and so they were rude? Or maybe they were like, I don't know, jerks to you or something. Later on, you find out, hey, they were just having a bad day. But that still kind of sticks with you, doesn't it? When somebody brings up that person's name, you're like, oh, yeah, I'm not too sure about them. Again, maybe you even know about the bad day, but it's still back there in the back of your mind. We also have what's called social categorization, which is the assignment of a person one has just met to a category based on characteristics a new person has in common with other people, with whom one has had experience in the past. Okay, again, we're going to go back to high school for this example because I think it's pretty, I don't know, there's some clear-cut social categories in high school. Think about the different types of students that we have at a high school, especially a big high school. Bigger high schools seem to have more categories, right? You have the jocks, you have the leadership kids, you have the band kids, you have the emos, maybe goth. I know that's all kind of out right now, but they're still there. They're still around. I think they just get relabeled different names over time. What else do you have? Ooh, you have the stoners. And so you're getting the idea, right? There's a lot of different categories, and I'm guessing, the drama kids, that's the other one that usually gets brought up. Here's the deal. There's a lot of different categories. How do we assign kids into those categories? Well, sometimes it's just based on some characteristics that they have in common with other kids in that category. Band kids, well, those are the kids in band, right? But could they be involved in other things too? Absolutely. I've known kids who were in band who also were swimmers or also played a different sport. They kind of crossed over, but yet they seem to be categorized into that one category for whatever reason. We often stereotype people. So it's a set of characteristics that people believe is shared by all members of a particular social category. So take just a minute and I want you to think about, okay, so in some of those groups that we named, what were some of the stereotypes that went with them? Like the band kids, like the drama kids, like the jocks. Honestly, I think the athletic kids, there's some really, really smart ones out there. But there's a stereotype, the dumb jock. Where did that even come from? The fact is, most athletes are actually really intelligent. But for some reason, that stereotype came into being, and it's taken a long time. It's still not gone away. So again, sometimes stereotypes can be positive, sometimes they can be negative. What would be positive stereotypes? Well, how about the leadership kids? Sometimes we see them as being, I don't know, snobs, but sometimes we look at them and go, they're really, they're usually those kids who are involved in everything, but also have really good grades. They're kind of on top of it. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're the partier kids. But figuring out, what are positive, the smart kids, what's positive there? We usually think pretty fondly, oh, they're really nice. Not always, but sometimes. Okay, we have something called the implicit personality theory, which is a set of assumptions about how different types of people, personality traits, and actions are related to each other, okay? So we come up with a schema of basically a schema is kind of just a set idea of what different types of people, personality, okay. How can I put this? I will just tell you right now that this ends up being kind of the foundation of sometimes where prejudice and discrimination comes into play. Because we do form an idea of how a certain people, whether it's race, religion, something like that, how they act or how they are. And it's a set of assumptions, right? Kind of interesting. We're going to dig deeper into that during our next slideshow, so I'm just going to leave you with that. And so come back and we're going to talk about discrimination and prejudice.